What's up, everyone? It's Andrea. Today, Picard is sweating the smallest problem they've ever faced. Do not try to reconfigure the ISOLINEAR chips, and we ask the question, how can Geordi not be into Ensign Cutie? Stay tuned.
Welcome to the TNG Podcast, the number one place in the Alpha Quadrant to geek out about all things Star Trek: The Next Generation. I'm your co-host, Shereese.
Hey, I'm your co-host, Andrea. Today we're breaking down Season 7, Episode 6, Phantasms. This episode was written by Brandon Braga and directed by Patrick Stewart. As the Enterprise sits adrift in space from unknown warp engine problems, Data's dream program leads to apparently aberrant behavior. It's another dream episode.
I know how much you love these episodes. And by love, I mean despise. But I actually really like this episode. And I like it because I feel like it's not just a dream for dream's sake, but the dream ties into what's going on the ship, which
is true. Yeah, which is cool.
We don't always get, I mean, I guess we did that time when like Troy was, they had the two moons circling. Oh, that episode was so bad.
God, that episode's the worst. Why would you even bring that up right now?
Because I was just thinking, like, when have we had a dream that was useful before? But that dream was sort of kind of supposed to be useful.
No phrase in the world has ever made me want to start air punching faster than two moons circling. I'm like, I just think I'm immediately violent.
Where are you? Hello? Where are you? What is going on now?
Troy, deliver the goddamn message and get out of there. Like, I need to see the whites of your eyes.
Deliver it until you say present. Oh my gosh. So anyways, that's what I really like about this episode, that the dream ties into the crisis on the ship. I appreciate that. And I would have liked this episode to be combined with when the dream program is introduced in Birthrights Part 1. I literally wrote in my notes, this should have been in Daddy Issues Part 1. And I was like, that's not right. What's the name of that episode? Yeah. So this should have been in Birthright Part 1. Like if that, awakening of the dream combined with the usefulness of the dream, I think that would have made this episode even stronger, because that was like useless back then, but so helpful right here. Totally. Anyways, I like this one. It's eerie. It's a little uncomfortable, but it's like, it still feels like a Trek episode to me. Anyways, what are your initial thoughts?
My initial thoughts were, no! And
how many O's?
1, 2, 3, 4, 7 O's. So I had a little time to think about it. And this is what I came up with why I despise dream episodes so much. I hate dream episodes because the set of rules that make up the construct of the universe are now totally thrown out the window, right? Even ridiculous sets of constructs, like think about Harry Potter. Like there are muggles and there are wizards that live together, and there's a secret world that we don't see, and they've got dragons and broomsticks and Quidditch and fucking magic and all this shit, right? But it's as if suddenly at the end of Harry Potter, they decide to decapitate Harry Potter and stick his head on a robot, and then that is now Harry Potter. It's like, we've never had robots before. Like, super weird, right? It just removed it. To me, it's the Game of Thrones series finale all over again, where part of the reason that it pissed off so many people, myself included, is because, and I felt this way with the Battlestar Galactica ending as well, a ton of explanations that they came up with did not fit the rules of the universe that they had spent seasons and seasons and seasons carefully building, right? So whenever
it feels like a ripoff.
Yeah, it feels like just cheap tricks where I'm like, oh, it was a figment of my imagination the whole time, but we've never had imaginary figments before. Okay, cool.
You know what? That's a really fair point. I used to write a lot when I was in elementary and middle school. I used to write a ton of fiction. And I remember I had this English teacher in 7th grade. I wrote this story, and it was this really like, I don't remember the story, but there was somehow I'd written myself into a pickle. Like the characters were in just a bad situation, and I couldn't see any way for them to get out. So I was just like, and then the main person woke up. So then everything was resolved. Totally. And I will never forget this teacher. He was a sub, by the way. And I don't remember who my real teacher was, but I do remember this sub because of what he said to me. He was like, your story was really good until the end. When you end something with, and then they woke up, that tells me that you as the writer could not figure out a way to make this story end in a satisfying way. This is lazy. And I was like, because no one had ever said that word about me ever before in my life. So
I've never been lazy ever.
I was like, what? And I was like a triple A plus kind of student type person. So I was like, what? He was like, this is lazy writing. This shows you didn't try at all. And it wasn't, and he didn't say it in any kind of mean way, in any kind of hurtful way. It was a very matter of fact kind of dressing down. And he was like, you can do much better. And I know that because the rest of the story is so good. So it is your job as the writer to figure out how these characters get out of this situation. And I was like, ugh. Like it really like it pierced me, but also I was like, oh my gosh, you're right. So ever since then,
he's true. Yeah.
Ever since then, whenever I see stories where it's like, and then they woke up, I'm like, lazy. That's lazy. You painted yourself in a corner and couldn't get out. And you, sir or madam, should have thought a little harder, because the opposite is true. When you see those stories where someone's painted into a corner, you don't know how they're going to get out, and then somehow they get out, it is so satisfying, right? Because you're like, I would have never thought of that. That is what makes good stories. That's exactly what makes good stories. And you're right.
I mean, first of all, I'm really thankful that man spoke so directly to you about that, because especially as teachers, and you could speak to this, and I've worked with elementary and middle and high school students, we have to be so gentle with them because their egos are fragile and they could be bruised at any minute, especially in like middle school where there's, you know, it's just a very awkward time, right? Yeah. But for someone to even just have the guts to be like, Shereese, you're better than this. You deserve better than this for yourself. This is lazy. It speaks to that man's qualities as like an honest and forthright person, but it also speaks huge volumes to you to be able to take that news and be hurt by it and know that he was telling the truth. Like you could be hurt by the truth, but you could also recognize it as the truth, right?
Oh yeah, because and it was the truth in love. It wasn't like him being mean, so that's why I could accept it. I knew he was not trying to hurt my feelings. He was just like, you need to know this.
Telling you what it was.
You need to know this. No one else is going to tell you this.
Right. Which I think, because I think if it was any other student, they'd be like, you're being mean to me. You're mean. And then they would have run off crying. It was
a different era too. Like when we were growing up as kids, teachers treated kids differently than how teachers have to treat kids today.
Yeah, it's a lot more
it's a lot more touchy-feely today than it was. But I will say, so I agree with you whenever, and I hadn't thought about this till you just said it, whenever we introduce a whole dream episode, what I love about it is it gives us a chance, like this episode, it gives us a chance to explore the ship in a totally different way than we've done before, and like use technology a bit differently. But you're also right that the rules of physics and all the rules we've carefully constructed can go out the window, and it can become something super lazy. I would also say Q episodes could fall under dream episodes, where it could become something super lazy, where you're just like, oh, well, Q just made like the stupid dog episode.
Now we're in French pig dog.
Yeah, exactly. Where it's like, well, Q just made that. So and and then he just froze Tasha Yar. And then, I don't know. And now you're in prison. And okay, and it's just like kind of random nonsense. But then there can be the really good Q episodes where it's like, we go back to,
oh, dang. Yeah.
Nottingham.
Yeah.
And you're like, whoa, this was really cool. So I hear you.
My questions on the initial thoughts where I was like, because it breaks the set of rules that make up the construct of the universe as we know it, I was like, is Riker's head going to turn into a bobblehead? Is Beverly going to turn into a potted succulent? Is the Enterprise going to end up in a snow globe? Like, what is happening? Which I think because I like having expectations. Yeah. Which actually was a horrible ending. I think it was the ending to General Hospital, maybe? Or like the series finale. I never watched the show, but I remember reading it was like the most hated series finale of all time because there's all this drama and squabbles and lust and death and all this stuff in this hospital. And then the end, it just turns out to be like a snow globe in like a child's bedroom, and he has like, he's on the spectrum or something, so he's just imagined this whole world inside of the snow globe, and then it just pans out of the snow globe, and it's like, are you freaking kidding me? People were so pissed.
That was super lazy. So that wasn't General Hospital. That show is still on after 10 billion years.
Still, but
it was some show called like St. Peter something.
Yeah, St. Elmo's Fire or something.
I only know that because one of our listeners wrote into us when you mentioned that before and said it's the name of this show and it was this episode and whatever. But yeah, that's just super lazy. It's like we didn't know what to do, so
we made it a dream.
Just made it a dream.
Yeah, we made it a daydream.
And I could see that. So as this episode opens, it's like your worst fears are realized, right? Because we're walking through the corridor and they've got that fish eye lens that makes everything seem warped and round in odd ways, which is always creepy. This is exactly what GoPro footage looks like to me all the time. And I'm like, no, thank you. No, thank you. Just give me a regular standalone camera. Don't connect it to the bottom of your snowboard. Just give me a drone. Give me a stationary shot.
A drone would be rad. Yeah,
the fish eye lens to me is always creepy. No matter how happy the scene is, it's creepy. But Data's just walking down a creepy hallway and everything's weird. You know it's a dream right away. And we hear a phone ringing and Data looks over and there's these 3 miners just beating the crap out of the ship. Now I have to say I loved this scene of like
the miners,
the hole in the ship and the plasma conduit behind it, and like It was like, it had like scorch marks and like cracked marks and stuff.
I noticed that, like the wall in front of the plasma conduit had like, it had been like chiseled away. It was, that part was really cool.
It was,
you notice
really
that Geordi is just hanging out in a hallway and he's like, hey, Data, we need to install the plasma conduit right away. And then Data goes, okay, Geordi, and walks off. And Geordi goes, this ought to be a lot of fun. And I was like, okay, Geordi, I know you're super into engineering, but this is a really weird thing to say. I think so that's when we start hearing that telephone ringing, and then we see the miners.
Of course, Data would dream about work tasks that he's being assigned.
What else is he going to dream about, girl?
To me, that's where the nightmare starts, is when you go to sleep and you're dreaming about work. So even in your sleep, you're working. It's like, that's the nightmare. In addition to that, there's a secondary nightmare of these miners who are breaking down a part of the ship, and like, it just looked so cool. But you're also like, who are these dudes and what are they doing? And so
Data's like sledgehammers.
With like, and picks and stuff. And Data's like, you guys are not authorized to do that. You need to stop or whatever. And they just completely ignore him. And then all of a sudden this shrieking, high-pitched noise comes out of Data's mouth. And they're like,
shrieky.
Be quiet. And so he's like, he stops immediately. And they all turn on him and they literally rip him limb from limb, ending with ripping off his head. And then he wakes up in like a cold sweat. The Data equivalent of a cold sweat. And you're just like, that was a horrible dream. Oh my gosh.
100%.
I've had a lot of scary, crazy nightmares and a lot of people trying to kill me in nightmares. I've never been decapitated though, to my recollection.
Yeah.
That is awful.
That's pretty rough overall. It's pretty bad. Yeah, it's a bad dream, right? So they tear his head off and he wakes up. And so it was a nightmare. A couple things I noticed. One, thank you for using a blanket. Because even in perfect temperatures, I can't imagine sleeping without even like a sheet over myself or anything. Like, it's so weird. And
Which
then
really are the Starfleet blankets. They're really just sheets.
Yeah, they're just sort of sheets. Yeah, they're like holographic-y looking sheets. And then number two, I guess Geordi isn't the only one who sleeps in his uniform with his comm badge on.
I knew you were going to say that. I was like, this is hilarious. He's completely fully clothed. So he's got part of the sleep thing down, but part of it he's still missing in the tutorial.
Yeah. I mean, he did better than Geordi, because Geordi just laid down like on like, it looked like a
He didn't even get under
couch.
the sheet.
No, he just laid on top of it looked like a couch. It didn't have like a blanket over it at all. He just laid on that. And I was like, please tell me that's not future beds, because that sounds absolutely awful.
I want a much better bed when I'm on a spaceship.
Thank you. Now, back from credits, the installation of a new warp core is done by Geordi, and they're ready to test it out for the first time. And Picard gets this message, and I think that's just a very funny, light little B-plot, but gets this message from Starfleet Command. He's been invited to go to the annual, like, Admiral's Banquet. And it's, like, super tedious all around. Picard doesn't want to go. And I love that he acknowledges we're in season 7 a little bit, where he's like, well, the last 6 years, we've been so busy fighting the Borg and crap that, like, I haven't been available to go, but now I have to go. And
Riker's like, couldn't you think of something, sir? And he's like, after 6 years, all my excuses are gone.
They're all gone.
I want to challenge that. I feel like you can come up with more than 6 excuses. Are you really digging deep, Picard?
Yeah.
Are you?
Q has kidnapped us again. I guess I can't make it. Bye,
he
guys.
could use that excuse anytime.
Yeah.
Except for if he did, Q probably would show up and be like, Mon Capitan.
Oh my God. Can you imagine? That would be fun, because he's like, well, now I'll really make you indisposed. Anyway, in main engineering, Data asks Geordi, like, have you ever had a nightmare? And they talk about it for a bit, but Geordi's really, really into his work and kind of isn't super listening to Data, because it turns out there are a couple of problems. You know, they're like, okay, engines are ready to go, and we've got just a few more minutes of like testing before we have to like hit engage. So like, we got to roll. Now, her name is Ensign Tyler, but the whole time I'm calling her Ensign Cutie Pie, because this absolutely adorable, beautiful woman reports to Geordi that she's done everything he's assigned her to do. And she's like, it's just like you said. You're so smart and cool and cute and smart and stuff. Like, do you want to grab a Coco No-No after your shift is over? And Geordi's
like, no.
Geordi, you have the most horrible
woman who's
track
ever
record.
Showed interest in you.
1, she's an engineer. 2, she's into you. 3, she's hot. What the fuck are you waiting for, Geordi?
Yeah, and really, in that whole list, we only needed number 2. She's into you. Like, that's the furthest you've gotten with all the women so far in the show. My only thing was like, oh, she's a subordinate. That's kind of weird. But maybe in future times, it's not weird. Because I feel like
it still is.
I don't know, a lot walking around naked's not weird. I don't know, a lot of stuff in future times not weird. So maybe that's not weird. Then.
No, but I would say it is weird, because look at Voyager when Janeway like is missing companionship in that part of her life, and she talks to Chakotay about it. And Chakotay's like, "You're in a really tough position. We're stranded a bazillion miles from home. We're not going to get back in our lifetimes, and there's nobody here that isn't a subordinate to you, and you can't have a relationship with them. Like this is awful, right?" So I feel like even still in
maybe
future
that
times.
tracks.
Yeah.
So that's my only hesitation about this relationship is like, oh, this might be a little awkward because he's your boss, and then like if you break up, that could that be weird? That's my only thinking of why
I never want to
Geordi
date anybody at work ever.
Let alone your boss, right? It's just creepy.
Ooh, bad idea. Bad idea.
Like, your boss or your subordinate. Either way to me is just like, ugh. But other than that, I'm like, yeah, it makes no sense to me why you are not into this girl. Like, but he's not. So Data picks up on it and he's like, Geordi, you're less than enthusiastic about Ensign Tyler, or whatever. He's just like, she's excited, but she's excited about me because she has a crush on me. And Data's like, you don't feel the same way. And he's like, no. And Data's like, okay, I will go and speak to her on your behalf. Geordi's like, no.
Don't do that.
I got it, buddy. I got it.
By the way, have you ever heard Geordi ever act this cool around someone who like he's into her? Yeah, or like something. Cause like he, in season 1, he'd be like, she has a crush on me, but she's a subordinate. So I have so many concerns. And what do I do? Like this time he was like, yeah, no, she has a crush on me. It's whatever. And I was like, really, Geordi? You've had exactly 0 women on the show have an effing crush. No, 1 woman, and then you like blew it with her immediately. So like this is only the 2nd person who has had a crush on you. And there was technically 3, but she was a married holographic character. Yeah. So
and we can round it up to 4. There was one when like the guy John who like turned into a beam of light.
That's the first
that's
girl.
The one you were counting? Okay, well. Okay, we're back to 3. We're back to
one
3.
of them isn't even real. Like, okay, so whatever. Geordi's like, yeah, she's got a crush on me. Like, he's acting like he's like Brad Pitt. Like, yeah, who doesn't have a crush?
But I guess this is what Geordi looks like when he's not interested in someone. This is what we haven't seen yet. Which tracks because that's how I would be if I wasn't interested in someone and they kept being like, oh my gosh, you're so great. I'd be like, thank you, but I'd be trying to like not encourage it too much. Yeah. So totally. In any case, Data kind of tries to bring back up the dream stuff or whatever, but at that moment they try the warp drive and immediately does not work. They tried a couple times and 3rd time is not the charm. All the lights go off in the ship.
Everything.
And then Data's like, all right, I'm just disconnecting the warp coils. And then all the power comes back up. And Geordi's like, Captain, I don't know. It'll take at least a couple of hours to fix it this time. And Picard's just like, okay, whatever.
Right. And if Baran were in charge, he'd tell Geordi that he has 45 minutes to fix it or else.
He's going to be killed where he stands. He's going to be airlocked.
With his... Right. Which, by the way, okay, not the Baran thing, but with the ship going dark, I love how that looks. Like when the whole...
From the outside or from the inside?
An external shot, of the ship and all the lights come off and it just becomes this kind of very dark gray black ship and I was like, ooh, it's so cool to see and it happens so rarely. So it's like seeing the saucer separating. It's like, woo, you rarely ever see that.
Yeah, and you see Data still working because I guess the panel still worked even though everything was dark and there were some lights on. To me, I'm just like, this is terrifying. There is a Voyager episode where they lose all the power on the ship and the ship's actually being boarded by like aliens or whatever who are firing on them in the dark because they live in the dark. So it's
terrifying.
Like a very scary, the crew is like, hello, and the bad guys are like,
where was this?
This is on Voyager.
Oh, okay, no wonder.
This is on Voyager.
Remember that.
So
in TNG.
That did not happen, at least as far as I remember, it didn't happen in TNG anywhere. But this idea of the whole ship going dark is like, to me, really scary, but it only goes dark for a second. But if I was on the ship, to your point that it so rarely happens, this would have freaked me out. If it lasted for any longer than the 10 seconds it lasted, I would have been like, what, is there air anymore? Like, it just would have panicked because the ship is always, like, the lights are always on.
There's
emergency power,
even night
power,
lights, something.
Backup power, like.
Well, okay, so this reminds me of something that actually happened here in Los Angeles a few years ago. This is LA. There's light pollution everywhere. So even at nighttime, the sky has kind of like a orangey glow to everything, right? You can't really see a lot of stars.
Rust.
It always makes me sad because I love space, so I always want to stare up at the sky, and so I end up getting to look at the one star you see, and it turns out it's actually just like probably an airplane flying overhead or whatever. So you don't really get to see stars, etc. Now, a couple of years ago, something happened where this planned power outage had to go down to fix some sort of circuits or something, and it was like the entire city of Los Angeles and surrounding counties were all out. The whole thing was out for like
that's probably so creepy, huh?
2 hours, but it was at like from 4 a.m. to 6 a.m. or something. So most of us weren't awake, right?
Okay.
However, my next door neighbor, who was one of those like crazy, 4 a.m. joggers, went for a run and it was so dark. She bumped smack into somebody, didn't see her coming at all. And luckily it happened like less than a block away from home. And they both kind of were like, oh my gosh, are you okay? Like they were fumbling around in the dark, trying to find each other. And they were like, are you okay? It's like, oh, I'm okay. We just bumped into each other.
They literally couldn't even see each other.
Yes. And they both were like, gosh, maybe it's too dark to be out for a run right now. So she ended up like walking home. And I was like, I can't even imagine how dark that is for Los Angeles. Because even if you take out, a couple of blocks of power, there's still so much freaking light pollution from like downtown LA. That's like almost an hour away from where we live. And still like, you still can see everything. So that, like, yeah, you're right. It's like, that is totally eerie for it to be like
and 2 hours is a really long time. I mean, it was the middle of the night, so it's great. But if it was like 6 p.m. in the winter, from 6 to 8, it would be so freaky.
Girl, Instagram, TikTok, all of it would be going crazy with people like messaging like, oh my God, it's so dark.
This is what we would use our data for.
Yep.
Our emergency minutes would be going to putting on social media how dark it is.
Sure would.
In any case, anyway, that's 100% what would happen. And in any case, in the next scene, we see Data in his quarters and he's staring at his cat who looks so adorbs. And he's like, and Troy comes in and Troy's like, what's going on? And Data's like, I was watching Spot sleep and I see that when he's asleep, I see him like, twitching his muscles and all these things. And I'm wondering like, what could he be dreaming about? Which I actually thought is so relatable for anyone who has pets of any kind and has ever seen your pet go to sleep. And if you've seen, especially with mammals, they tend to move around a lot when they're asleep. Other types of animals like
fish,
tend to be extremely stationary when they're asleep. But I think a lot of pet owners can relate to being like, what are you dreaming about? Like, especially with dogs and cats, because dogs and cats will like bark or like jump
my dog,
or whatever.
My dog sleep. Penny does run in her sleep, like all 4 of her legs like twitch, but they twitch all together. So it's like she really is running in her sleep and she barks in her sleep. So she has a big, scary, stranger danger bark, which I appreciate, but she has the same bark, but it's more like a barking whimper, but her mouth is closed. So it's like coughing with your mouth closed. It's a lot more muted, but you're right. It's like you can be a caveman with no scientific knowledge whatsoever and have a pet and be like, they're dreaming. You could know exactly what's happening with them. You just don't know what they're seeing.
And be curious about it. Right. So I was like,
100%.
I think this is super relatable for Data to be like, wait a minute. And then everything that he says where he's like, Spot's never seen mice. Is he dreaming about chasing mice? He doesn't even know what a mouse is. Like, what could he possibly be dreaming about? His whole world is this.
He's never had to hunt for food. He's never had to do any of the things that real cats do.
So what could he possibly be dreaming about? Which is a fair question. And Troy is like, I see you've got dreams on the brain. And she says that Geordi was worried about you and asked me to come and see you. And so that shows that Geordi really was listening to him. Yeah. And not only that,
thanks for being a friend, Geordi.
Yeah, I want the extra step of being like, hey, Troy, can you go check on Data? Because he's really like stuck on this nightmare. And I think he needs your help. I just loved everything about that. I thought that was such a beautiful thing for Geordi to do that he didn't have to do.
No, especially in the midst of engine failure problems
which is all falling on him as the head engineer, who this was his brilliant idea.
Yeah. Now, Data finds this nightmare to be unsettling, and Troy's like, dark images are a natural expression of your unconscious, like if you had an unconscious, and there may be part of you that's trying to communicate with yourself, so you probably should not suppress that part of yourself. So I love that Data, she leaves and Data decides to try another dream sequence. So with his shoes and his comm badge and his uniform on, gets back into bed and he does the cutest little android yawn
like
and goes
fake
to sleep.
Yawn. Yeah. And he goes,
it is so
like he
cute.
smacks his lips and then plumps his pillow. It's just really, it's really funny.
It seems like something a child would do when they've seen their parents go to sleep enough times that they're like, I'm going to mimic the actions. And I think it's really weird. Now we're in this dream. Data's in 10 forward. It's totally empty.
And dark and creepy.
And dark and creepy. And then there's like kind of some like darkness music. And then suddenly, as dreams happen, now he's not alone. Worf is in there eating some cake that had a comm badge on it, which I was like, that's weird. And he says it's cellular peptide cake with mint frosting. And we hear that damn phone ringing again. And now Beverly is there and Riker. Okay, and this is the dream shit I don't like. There's a straw coming out of Riker's temple. and Beverly is drinking from that straw. And I was like, ooh.
This is one of the most disturbing scenes in TNG that I recall. Like, I remember this scene as a kid, and I remember how creeped out I was by not the cake. Cake I'm cool with. It was the straw.
We all love cake.
Sucking juice out of his brain. Like, that was so like gross to me. And as it like now as an adult, I'm like, oh, that's kind of like what she's supposed to be drinking exactly. It's so silly. But as a kid, I remember being like, oh my God, what is she doing? What is that? Why is there a straw in his head? Just everything about that was very disturbing.
It's really visceral, right?
I think and I don't know if it's the straw. Something about it is just disturbing.
Drinking that brain juice, I guess.
It's extremely disturbing.
Well, I think what adds to the unsettling component of this, and they did a great job, is that there's that fucking phone ringing.
Yeah.
Constantly. And it's just incessant. And so it adds to this disturbing, like, what is going on, like, aspect of this dream. Now, Data looks for the phone and finds the workers again. And he does that same high-pitched sound, and the men tell Data to be quiet. And, you know, they're kind of clamoring over this table. And so they disperse.
And they hand him a knife.
And they hand him a knife, this really cool looking like bread knife.
So cool.
And it's Troy's face with a cake body on the table, which I was like, what a cool concept. Like, okay, we're going to have Troy's body be a cake, but her head's going to be her head. And I'm sure that the writing team was like, okay, how do we actually make that work? So what they essentially did was have Marina Sirtis like sit under a table and poke her head through. And then just like the cake part was like up to her chin. And so she begs,
but it looks legit. Like
it looks so legit.
And you see Troy's like uniform and stuff out of cake.
The blue uniform. Yeah. And it's just
cool.
like her torso. It kind of the cake cuts off like at her waist. And she takes, he takes the knife and she begs Data not to hurt her, but he says he must, and apologetically takes a gigantic knife to her collarbone and cuts. And then she goes, Data. And like it wakes up and it's that sort of TV movie transition of the character in the dream saying his name and then flash to the real Troy in his quarters.
And the fake Troy was screaming out of pain because a chunk of her body was being cut out.
Ooh.
But the real Troy was just trying to wake him up.
Yeah.
And he opens his eyes and it's Troy, Geordi, and Worf standing over his bed.
Yep.
And Data's like, what's wrong? Like, what's going on? And she's like, we've been trying to wake you up for the last 5 minutes. And he's like, wait, my internal chronometer was supposed to wake me up 35 minutes ago. And Worf is like, you must have overslept. And Data's like, that's impossible.
I can't do that.
I can't. It's impossible for me to oversleep. So he goes, something's wrong. And then it's like, duh, commercial.
Yeah. Well, I was like, hold the phone. Geordi, Worf, and Troy were trying to wake Data up for 5 minutes. That's a long time to try to wake someone up.
Yes.
They weren't touching him either. They were just standing there going, Data for 5 minutes? Really? That just seems really weird to me. I feel like they should have been like, we've been trying to wake you up for 30 seconds or something.
Yeah,
like
they should have tried touching
like,
him or
Data,
like hitting him with electric charge or something.
You do wow, girl, remind me to never have you wake me up.
No, because I'm saying he's an android. So first shaking him because that's what you would do with a biological system. So it should work.
You kind of do the shoulder, shake.
Yeah, a tap, a poke, a little shake, a harder shake. But yes, just standing there saying his name very loudly for 5 minutes. They should have realized that didn't work after about 30 seconds. But
yeah, but all right. So he overslept, which is like, something's wrong, right? So Data goes to see Sigmund Freud in the holodeck. Love a holodeck scene. He couldn't stop cutting the cake. And what does that all mean? And it's this dismemberment dream. And Freud says, your mechanicistic qualities are trying to reassert themselves over this more human side. The workmen symbolize trying to destroy the ego, and Freud goes a little bit Oedipal on the whole, the knife thing being a penis analogy or something, and you want to have sex with your mom. Yeah. And you want to have sex with your mom. That's the Oedipal complex. And Data doesn't believe that this is what he's searching for. So he's like, all right, end program, and walks out. And I love that we have this little callback on the bridge. Admiral Nakamura is like, Picard, where the fuck are you? You said you were coming
to be here this morning. I mean, the event happens tonight, but you were supposed to be here schmoozing all day.
Where the hell have you been? Where are you?
So what had happened was I was on my way, right? Like I had said engage. I don't want to
hear it, Picard.
But then after I said engage, the warp core like stopped. But you know what's crazy? is also Impulse also stopped. So like we literally cannot move. So he goes, do we need to send a tow ship? No, of course, no, we got it.
It's fine.
I
It's
promise
totally
you,
fine.
I will be there on time with bells on.
Mm-hmm. And Geordi is like, okay,
and I cannot at all keep that promise, but I'm going to make that promise right now.
Nope. And it's a promise I don't want to keep. So Geordi says engines are ready. Try again.
And engage.
The ship starts to take off. And then immediately stalls again. So it's like, what the fuck is going on? The warp field has collapsed. Impulse engines are down too. Now they're adrift. So anytime you hear the words adrift, it's like, uh-oh, something's really
it
wrong.
Seems really bad and scary, but like no one's worried about it. I guess because they're not in a Borg battle or anything like that.
Dear God,
they're like 2 feet away from Space Station 84. So they're like, you know, like they're not tripping. They're like, we're adrift, but we're not heading that way. So we're not going to hit it. Like, we're good. Like everybody took this being adrift completely in stride. I was like, adrift? That's the bad thing to be.
Thank you. By the way, listeners, Shereese just opened her eyes all innocent like an 8-year-old. Like, it's bad.
I know that word. That word's bad.
And everybody else is like, adrift. Do. Right? So Ensign Cutie Pie is still crushing on Geordi. He keeps meaning to talk to her and let her down gently, but he hasn't had the time. So Geordi ends up handing Data a brace coil and wants him to check it for microfractures. And when he hands him the brace coil, we look down. It's the knife that Data used to cut the Troy cake. So it's like, wait.
It has absolutely no coiling to it whatsoever.
Nothing. I was like, really? A brace coil?
Could we have called it like a strut or just something not coil in it? It's like the galactic string or whatever all over.
Yeah.
Where you're like, it's a string that is like 1,000,000 miles wide.
It's 1,000,000 miles long and 1 nanometer wide. And you're like, okay, I don't think that's all right. Anyway, now as Data is kind of tripping out about this, like, wait. I just saw this in my dream. So now we're realizing there's a connection between what's going on in the ship and what's going on in Data's dream. So it's like, there's some connection. We don't know how. As he's kind of like freaking out about this a little bit as androids, as best as he can as an android, he looks at Geordi and the back of Geordi's neck opens up into this like scary mouth thing. And then
like out of his skin, like his skin turns into a mouth. That's also this is like the second most disturbing image of TNG. And I remember this vividly as a kid as well. Cause I remember being like, oh my gosh, what just happened?
Yeah. And then you're like, is that going to happen to me too? Like
it was terrifying. It just was so unexpected.
Well, the sound effect that they did as well for that
was creepy.
So creepy. They did such a great job with that. Now, Data, now this ringing, now Data's hearing this ringing. On top of all this, Data starts hearing that phone ringing again. And we're like, but wait, he's not asleep. Or was he this whole time? And that's, again, a thing I don't like about dreams where it seems like you are in the waking portion of the story and then weird shit starts happening. And you're like, wait, have we been dreaming this whole time?
Right. And then you're like, when did the dream start? Did the dream never end? Has it always been a dream?
Which is kind of annoying.
And he turns the corner and all of engineering is empty. So then we go, oh, he is dreaming. And it's exactly the question, like, did he just start dreaming right now? Or was everything like a dream? Or what? And so the whole engineering is empty and he looks around very confused. And then suddenly Riker is standing there with a straw in his head saying, aren't you going to answer the phone? So you're like, okay. Yeah. And then Data taps on his belly and inside of him is one of these cool old school phones.
Yeah. Like an early 1930s, 1940s type phone. I'm thinking back in time. In the 1920s, they had like the handheld part and then the receiver that you held to your ear, like the old telephone, so the little horn that you put to your ear. So I was like, this is like a 30s, 40s type telephone. You know what I did notice? And great job for props on this. You can buy rotary phones today that are modeled like a rotary phone, but they're not. The rotary part is actually push button because I had a phone like that for a while. And it looks old fashioned, but it has a coil cord. The old-fashioned ones are kind of like a straight cord that just has fabric wrapped around like on the outside of the sheath. And that's the kind of phone they use. So I was like, wow, they really were paying attention to the details, the tiny details of getting the phone cord right. I was like, I just appreciated that so much.
Well, it probably was a real phone that they found from wherever.
God knows where.
It probably wasn't a prop. It probably was a phone from their box of old phones at the studio, which is still amazing. The phone was beautiful.
It was really cool.
He answers the phone and then he hears Freud's voice on the other line and Freud says, kills them all before it's too late. And you're like, uh-oh, he's holding a knife and being told to kill everyone. or everything, or what are we even talking about? This can't be good.
Yeah.
This can't be good. And then Geordi like shakes him and we see that he's talking into the knife, like it's a phone.
He's holding it up. Yeah.
And everyone's staring at him. And Geordi's like, Data? And you're just like, oh, okay. So he just had a waking dream in the middle of his shift while holding this big scary knife. I think it's time for you to be off of duty, sir.
Yeah, it's time to take a break. You're falling apart a little bit in some kind of weird ways we can't explain yet, and you can't explain, and it's concerning. And
I don't think you should have
you're talking to knives,
access to brace coils anymore.
No,
Let's go ahead and send you to Troy and get that figured out.
Carvers or whatever. Yeah. None of it. I did kind of laugh because when he pops open that hatch in his torso and there's that old phone inside, I was like, well, I guess that answers the question as to whether he's more of like an Apple guy or an Android guy. And I was like, he's definitely Android then. Like, that's kind of cool. So I was like, hee about that. Even Ensign Cutie Pie in all this, though, she was like, what the F? Like, this is weird. And she doesn't even know what's happening. She's just like, your dude Data is talking to a knife.
He's standing in the middle of engineering talking to a knife. This is just
really weird.
It's weird. So next scene, we see him in Troy's office, which was appropriate. This is where he should be now.
Perfect place to be.
And Troy's like, well, it sounds like a waking dream or a hallucination. That's what I would say to a human patient. But for you, I think it must be technological. And Data's like, I've run every single thing in the book and I cannot find anything wrong with my systems. And so then Troy is like, if you were human, I would say that you're starting to develop a new neurosis. And Data's like, really? Can we meet like many times and talk about it? And she just laughs and she goes, Data, you're the first person who has ever been in this office excited about the prospect of a new neurosis.
Birth of a new psychological condition, right?
You are so excited.
So bad, right? So Troy's like, I think we should start counseling regularly. And Data's eyes light up and he's like, daily? And Troy goes, no. Let's maybe start weekly and see how we go. And she does say, I'd like you to shut down the dream program going forward for some time to just reflect on this experience, right? Meanwhile, Admiral Nakamura is like, okay, Picard, you've had warp problems and impulse problems in your drift. Sure, you're adrift. And Picard's like,
wink, wink.
Yeah.
And he goes, you're not trying to get out of this, are you?
Yeah. Of course not,
no.
Right? Yeah, no.
Ironically, he's not this time.
He really isn't, actually. He's like just resigned himself to the fact that like, I guess I'm going to have to go to this. But I love that Admiral is like, do I have to call a tow ship at this point? And that's when Picard's like, no, I have every faith in our engineers. And I'm like, should you though? Because it's been a couple of hours and we're still in the same place. But so
you
Picard,
should call a tow ship. You should just call a ship.
Picard, because guess what? Even if you guys are being towed and halfway through your tow job, turns out comes back on, you're like, okay, we got it. Thank you. Anyway, Picard now has an admiral breathing down his neck, right? So he's in the hot seat. So he decides
and this is really funny. He has an admiral breathing down his neck to get him to a party. This is like the lowest stakes we've ever had in the history of every episode. But Picard is sweating bullets about it, which I think is really funny.
Well, I think that I love that like his solution was to go breathe down Geordi and Data's neck,
which is not very Picardy of him.
He's like, well, have you run this? And they're like, yep, 2 hours ago. Well, have you done that? We're running it now. The results will be ready in 10 minutes. And I love that Picard is like, well, like he's just blowing raspberries. Like he doesn't even know what to do. And he goes, maybe if I reconfigure these isolinear chips. And Geordi's like, no. And I was like, remember what happened the last time we fucked with the isolinear chips? Okay. Didn't go so well.
Granted, we were all drunk on a virus.
On a sexy drunk virus, yeah.
But still.
So Ensign Tyler swoops in and saves the day. And she's like, Captain, I kind of need you to do some menial labor in the cargo bay if that's not asking too much. And Picard is just like grateful to have something to do because at least he feels like he's working towards a solution instead of just sitting on his hands, And while this is happening, Data keeps looking down at like the knife and kind of looking back. So he's sort of hyper fixating on it. And Picard goes off with Ensign Tyler and Tyler saves the day. And Geordi's like, remind me to thank her later, and he turns to talk to Data and he's halfway through a sentence before he realizes that Data and the knife are gone. And it's like, hello? Data?
Yeah. And then
Boyle?
Bueller? And then and then the next scene, we have Troy walking down this completely deserted hallway, very reminiscent of Data's dream, except for there's no fisheye lens. So we know it's not a dream, but it is super creepy. For some reason, there's no one else on the entire ship.
Nobody around.
No one coming in and out of rooms. No one doing anything. It's just Troy. And she keeps looking behind her and the music is creepy. So she keeps stopping going.
She thinks she's being
and
followed.
Like looking behind her. And you're like, what's going on? And then she goes to the turbo lift. The doors open and she, she's taken aback by the doors opening. So that freaks you out because you're thinking someone's inside of the turbo lift, but they're not. So she goes in the turbo lift, and as the doors are about to close, Data's hand comes in and she gasps again. And then she's like, oh, it's just you, Data. Hey, come on in. And then suddenly he pulls the knife really high and he says, try to stay extremely still. And she's like, what are you doing? No. And you just see Data stabbing and stabbing and stabbing. You're like, oh my gosh.
I know. It's really, really violent.
It's really brutal.
He stabs her like in the collarbone.
Yeah. And you see the look on his face. His eyes are just like blank. And
it's really scary.
Yeah. And you're like, what the heck? And the very next scene, we see Worf and Riker walking down the hallway, just chit-chatting about Alexander and life and stuff. And you're like, wait a minute, what's going on in the turbo lift? Thankfully, they happen to be going to that exact same turbo lift. And when they open it,
goodness,
because I wasn't sure what they were going to find, like if they were just going to see Troy in a pool of blood on the floor or what.
Yeah, they're like, what do you even do? She's just screaming. She clearly can't overpower this android. There isn't even time to like reach her comm badge to ask for help.
Right. There's just a shock. Yeah.
I will say, if you were getting stabbed in the chest, especially kind of like at that collarbone, like right where he was cutting the cake version of her.
Yeah.
There would be so much blood, and it was just like there was
no blood at all. There was blood on the tip of the knife.
It was blood on the tip of the knife, and there was blood on her, but it was just like a perfect little round or kind of ovally cut with just some red smeared on it. But there wasn't blood like in the air, in the turbo lift, on her uniform.
Where it would have been. There should have been like a pool of blood running down her arm, on the floor, on the wall, which is what I expected to see, probably because I watch a lot of crime drama shows. But you're right. She just was somehow passed out. We don't know why, because it wasn't from blood loss, because there was one dot of blood. But in any case, maybe from shock.
Yeah.
So the doors open, and we see Troy on the ground, and we see Data standing over her with a knife. And then he turns and tries to attack Riker in the face with a knife. And then Worf kind of wrestles him down. And Riker runs in to check on Troy and calls a medical emergency. And then Data kind of snaps out of it a little bit. And he's like, huh? What's going on? And you're like,
well, see, I had an issue with that scene because Data turns to stab Riker, who puts his arm up and stops an android from overpowering him. And I was like, really?
Data wasn't trying that hard.
I see. Clearly, I don't know. He was trying hard enough to freaking almost kill Troy. So he ends up like Riker ends up kind of like putting his arm up to block and sort of do-si-dos under his arm, and then that's when Worf kind of grabs Data by the shoulders and holds him. But I was like, everybody on the ship combined couldn't hold Data back. I don't know what we're thinking about.
Like if Data really wanted to stab him, he would have just stabbed him.
Yeah, so I was like, I don't buy that, but whatever.
I didn't buy Worf holding him back. I was like, Worf is really strong, but he can't hold.
He's not android strong
back. Yeah,
right.
He's not
and like strong. Riker's big and strong, but he's not strong enough to put up one arm and stop a freaking android. But okay, sure. So turns out Data had a waking dream and this uncontrollable urge to destroy the mouth that he was seeing on Troy's shoulder. So it seems like he's seeing more of these mouths everywhere, because we only saw the Geordi one. Now we cut to the sick bay, and I gotta say, Troy makes the most stunningly beautiful patient. Her hair is perfect. She's got this cute little outfit on with just the little shoulder sort of unvelcroed so the little device can be on there. People in the hospital look terrible for a number of reasons. They look pale. Their hair's a mess. There's tubes everywhere. They're sick. The lighting is really bad. It's going to be bright white lighting so doctors can see clearly. She looked like movie star sick patient. It was hilarious to me.
I think she's been in the sick bay more than any other bridge crew member, and she always looks fantastic. Whether like whatever scenario she's in, even when she was like super old and then she like youngified and stuff. Like it was just like she makes a cool patient.
But I will say, when she's in that stupid one moon circling episode, she is in the hospital and her hair is like frizzy and she looks absolutely frazzled.
Yeah,
and I was like, that was like
lack of sleep. Yeah,
it was lack of sleep. So they had to make her hair look frizzy because
they had to make her look tired.
They had to make her look tired, right? If you have frizzy hair, you're tired. I guess I'm tired all the time. But yeah, she was like picture perfect. Now Beverly takes off the device because Troy kind of snaps to her and she's like, Data, no, oh my God, where am I? So Bev comes over and she's like, you're fine. I have this little like device that's gonna heal this laceration. So she takes it off. And Beverly's surprised at this like discoloration. It looks like a bruise left behind and it looks like a rash. The tricorder picks up some kind of cellular degradation, but it's totally unrelated to the laceration. And so they're like, it looks like some sort of residual interphasic signature. So I was like, now we're starting to get the ball rolling on like some kind of answer.
Yeah, we get some kind of connections. And the part that we skipped was in the observation lounge, Data was talking to Picard under heavy guard, explaining what he saw and why he did this, because he remembers vividly attacking Troy. He remembers trying to attack Riker, and Picard was asking him questions, and he was like, "Did you also see a mouth on Riker?" And he was like, "No, I saw a straw, but it was in his head, and that's what I was trying to attack." So Picard's already been like,
I love that Riker's like, a straw in my head.
Yeah, like he had the right reaction to that, right? Like that is crazy and ridiculous. And so Picard's hearing all of like the secondhand version of what happened in the dreams that Data didn't want to tell Geordi earlier because it was too disturbing. But now he's coming clean with everything. And Picard's just like, okay, you're going to have to be relieved of duty and confined to quarters. You have to just stay there because like, this is unsafe. And Data's like, a very wise precaution. I'll be in my quarters. So the guards take him to his quarters. Worf walks him in, confiscates his sidearm. And right before Worf leaves, this is after the sick bay situation. Right before Worf leaves, Data's like, can you please do me a favor and take Spot? Because I would hate to think that I might also have another waking dream and injure him. So can you take Spot and keep him safe from me? And so Worf is like, you want me to take your animal? He's like, yes. And he's like, Spot, come. And Data looks at him all confused and is like, Spot doesn't come like a dog would. You have to actually like grab him. So he goes and hands him to Worf, and Worf holds him
totally at arm's length,
as far as possible away from him. And he says, can you feed him with such and such supplement? Worf's like, yes. Can you give him water? Yes, yes. And then he starts going too far. He's like, you have to tell him he's a good cat and a pretty cat. And he keeps going, and Worf looks at him and he goes, I will feed him. Yeah. Data's like, well, I suppose that'll be enough.
I guess that's fine.
I guess that's good.
Feline supplement number 25. Don't forget. Yeah. And I love as Worf goes to walk out with this cat held at arm's length. He sneezes on the way out. And I was like, dang, that's
like,
sucks.
And he's allergic to cats.
I'd be like,
where's Barclay? Data, he actually likes this cat.
Yeah. Data, can you just check the logs and see if there's somebody else that isn't like,
I mean, it was literally just a matter of convenience because Worf came into the room to get his firearm. He was like, oh, while you're here, can you take the cat?
Right.
But yeah, Barclay would have been a better call for that.
Yes. Well, two things I noticed in Data's quarters, there is a beautiful little bonsai tree on the table. And that really cool geometric blue and black and red and white and yellow painting that Data did like way back in an early season. So I was like, oh, cool. Like these little world building things where it's like he painted this picture and liked it so much he kept it in his quarters. Like, that's so neat. Now in sickbay, Beverly is like, Captain, we have a problem. Troy's tissue is breaking down on a cellular level and it's spreading. So it's these creatures attached to the blood vessels to feed on people, and everyone is infected. And they live outside the phase of what we can see and hear. So it's kind of like that episode, like The Next Phase, where Ensign Rowe and Geordi were like dead, but they weren't dead. They were just unfazed. They were out of phased and like we couldn't see them, right? So these creatures look really creepy. They look like leeches with like extra tentacles. And they're on everyone.
Really cool.
They look really cool.
I mean,
really
creepy and disgusting and very well made.
Yeah. And so Beverly has this really cool light, this kind of strobe light, and checks them all. And Riker has one on his temple where the straw was. Troy has one on her collarbone where the cake cut was. Picard's got one, I think, on his neck, maybe. And I thought it was really weird that Beverly said they attach to the skin and they kind of feed through osmosis, like the way leeches drink blood. But Beverly scanned her lab coat, and there was one on her lab coat. And I was like, can't you just take the lab coat off?
Like, it was on her arm under the lab coat, but because it's interphasic, like it's outside of the phase of the clothes and whatever else. It's like,
oh, that's why that showed up there. Because I was like, I'll just take the coat off. Like, it feels kind of
so it was stuck to her arm, but you could only see it with this special scanner. That's where it was. That was the location. But so it's disturbing because everyone's infected and it's spreading. So next thing you know, we're in the observation lounge, and Beverly's breaking it down a little further and says that if these things are not stopped, they're going to destroy all of our cellular connections, and we're just going to be a pile of chemicals.
They're going to just drink us dry, essentially.
Yes, which is bad, which is very bad.
And the creatures are feeding on cellular peptide, which is like, we've heard this word before, right? So all the creatures are in places where Data has seen them in his dreams. And they were like, okay.
However, Data is not infested.
Data is not infected. He's not a biological life form. Now they go, okay, well, how about we create a waking dream to induce the images so we can get more information? So they have this really brilliant plan that I wouldn't have thought of. They hook up the holodeck to calibrate to Data's neural net so they can see what he sees. So they're like, okay, Data, we're going to have you go back into your dream state, and it's going to project into the holodeck so we can see what the fuck is going on and figure out some sort of solution. So that's what they do. And Picard and Geordi follow Data to 10 forward, and Beverly's drinking from Riker's head. And we've got the Troy cake, and they say it's cellular peptide cake. And then one of my favorite moments of all of TNG is Worf with his mouthful of cake goes, with mint frosting. Yeah, like with his mouth all full of cake. And I was like, that's so funny. So we've got the phone ringing again.
You know what? I actually always remembered that as well.
Yeah.
Because I love cake. So I always remember seeing like that first scene when Worf is eating the cake and he's just like getting down on it. And he's like, it's cellular peptide cake with mint frosting. And I always remember as a kid being like, oh man, I want a piece of that cake. Like maybe not necessarily Troy. And I don't think mint frosting would be great on a cake. But like the cake itself, it did not look like mint to me. It looked like a delicious vanilla cake with some buttercream frosting and like beautiful decorations.
Yeah.
And I was like, I want that birthday cake. I want that.
I want that birthday cake, but then I will immediately scrape off all the frosting because I've seen enough kids eat cupcakes at school to know that colored frosting is going to color your teeth black and blue, your tongue black and blue, the inside of your whole mouth, everything. And it's just gross to me. And I'm like, bleh. Mint frosting also does sound weird, but if it's like a chocolate cake with mint frosting,
right? But it was a vanilla cake, so I was like, no, buttercream is probably a better fit. But yeah, chocolate mint might work.
Food Network, where we're breaking down.
Well, you know what? You're always making these. You're recreating Guinan's drinks. Maybe we need to recreate this Troy cake minus the Troy.
It wouldn't actually be that hard. I'm not an artist with faces and stuff like that.
And I don't want to eat a face. So
no, I could do the body, and then there would just be like, I would just print a picture of Troy's face and spread it or something.
You could just do a square that's a uniform. Well, anyways, we can brainstorm this offline. Okay, so in any case, I want to eat this cake. But that is something that I remember, like as much as that straw in the head, which I never forgot, and the mouth on the neck, which I never forgot, it was the cake with the mint frosting where I was like, man, that looks like a really good piece of like Costco sheet cake.
Yeah,
that totally
iconic like scene of like this black and blue cake. Now, as they're kind of eating this cake, as Worf is eating this cake and they Data hands a piece to like Geordi and Picard, this phone starts ringing again, and they pop open the hatch and Data's torso, and Geordi answers it and says, it's for you, Captain, which is like, what? And so it's Freud
because it's Data's dream. So why was it for Data? But it wasn't.
Why would it? Why? Yeah. So turns out we kind of flash right into Freud's study, and the workmen come in to destroy the plasma conduit. And that's when
Freud starts to get, so the phone starts ringing again. And Freud's like, answer it. And Picard's like, he reaches for the phone because this is how they got here, because Freud said, kill them all. And he's like, what's going on? And they're in Freud's study. And then the phone rings again. And Freud's like, answer it. So he goes to reach for the phone again. And Freud says, no, don't be so literal. I mean, respond to it. Respond to them. And he's like, respond to them. Them who? And just as Picard asked that question, the workers come in and shoot Freud dead, like before he can give away the secrets. And again, I was like, oh my gosh, like where did the gun come from? First they have sledgehammers and pickaxe. Now they have guns. So they kill Freud before Freud can tell Picard the secret. And then they pick up the couch that Data's laying on and move it to the side and pull some scarf or rug or whatever off of the wall. And you see that big opening from before with the plasma conduit behind it. And they start tearing it apart again. And Picard is like, what? Like, who are these people? What are they doing? And Geordi's like, I don't know about all that, but I do recognize this conduit. It's the conduit we've been working on this whole effing time. That's the conduit. Like, I see that in my nightmares. That is the conduit.
That's
and
the one.
Like, and he's like, what's going on? And they're like, shut up, leave us alone or whatever. And they turn on Data and Geordi with their pickaxes and stuff.
Jesus
and they start to
Christ.
back up.
So
like,
scary.
And Data jumps up to kind of be like, to protect them. And he's like, you have to leave my friends alone. So they turn on Data and Data starts shrieking again. And they're like, be quiet. And so he stops like he always does. And Picard's like, Data,
keep doing
again. Keep doing that. It hurts them. And so he's like, okay. So he opens his mouth and the men collapse to the floor and die.
Yep.
And you're like,
I love when they say, "Who are
you?"
you?" And they go, "Your enemies." I was like, "Can you be more specific?" Because like we've got
Because
like
we have a lot
Borg,
of enemies.
I
This
have
is
so
a
many.
big
I've got
universe.
Borg. I've got this
Are
animal
you an enemy we've met before?
Yeah.
Let's start there. No, you're a new enemy. Okay. What did we do to make you an enemy? Because we have a whole list running and we don't know the situation.
We don't know what we did.
Yeah, but they're just like, we're your enemy and we want to destroy you and kill you for absolutely no reason. And you're like, well, all's fair in love and war, so we're going to do the same. So Data, as soon as he shrieks and they fall down dead, he goes, I understand, and ends the dream sequence. And he's like, I know exactly what to do. He has Geordi reprogram his neural net that's already connected to the ship to send a burst throughout the entire ship with that crazy high-pitched noise. And he's like, it killed him in the dream. It'll probably kill them in real life too. So they run the sound through the ship. And here's a funny thing. Picard comes over to Beverly and is like, we're going to try something. So I want you to keep an eye on the creatures and let us know if it's working to kill them. She's like, okay. So Data starts the sound and it goes so high that we can't hear it anymore, which is great because that sound is awful.
Yeah, I know. I was like, are we going to have to hear that for like 2 full minutes?
For
and I was
any
like,
more time
and it was
than
like,
we've already heard it.
And that was it. And I was like, okay, thank goodness.
I think the amount of time they did that and the amount of time they did the ringing of the phone was like all the time you could spend on those annoying sounds.
That's
like, one more second would have been too much.
Yep.
So then Beverly's looking and she's like, it's working. And I was like, how can she see that? They look exactly the same as they did before. Were they flashing flashing before?
No, they were like pulsing, but they start to like fade out. They basically phase out and disappear. So that's how she's like, to me,
they looked exactly the same. And she was like, it's working. And I was like, is it? Because they said tricorders can't work on them. So
they sort of, it's just because of the light. Like they start to like sort of dissipate. And that's kind of it.
Okay, well,
which I'd be like, see, can we just double check and run extra tests because we couldn't see them before? Maybe they've gotten used to the light or something, and like they phased into a different phase that this light doesn't pick up. Let's maybe check. But it worked.
Let's keep that sound running for like a couple more hours, just in case there's like eggs or something. Who knows?
Yeah, exactly.
But in any case, it works, and the day is saved. And the next thing we know, we're hearing Captain's log. The creatures have all been destroyed. And they figured out that they stowed away on board because they were connected to that warp thing that they got from
the new warp core that they got brought over.
The thing they've been working on this whole time was infested with them, and they were the ones like causing all the trouble with the ship. So Data's dream was actually what was going on.
Yeah, so the trouble is now over, like the engine trouble, which is really convenient. So
but
you're right.
But now they need to create a whole new warp coil thing because that old one is like garbage now.
Do you think the warp coil just looks like another knife?
It's got to be like a bigger knife because
I'm like, can it look at least like some sort of coil at all, like a definition of a coil? Like it's kind of spiraling. Anyway,
this is when the technobabble fails them. Like this is when you should use a word that we have no recollection of because it doesn't make any
calibrating
sense.
Sheath, something. I don't know, something.
Right. Anyway. Or when they say like, what is the thing they always say about Data having in his L phase discriminator or whatever, something like that.
Yeah.
Something like that. We'll be like, a discriminator. Sure. Sounds good.
Absolutely.
So it's going to take another 6 hours for him to replicate this whole new piece again. And Picard's like, 6 hours? That means I'll miss the entire banquet. And Data's like, Geordi's like, I could speed it up if you want. And Picard's like, no. We want safety as our top priority. So take your time. And Geordi's like, understood.
Right. And Troy comes to see Data. He's got this big
platter
tray, a big platter with a lid on it. And she, Data's like, I haven't had a chance to apologize for stabbing you. And Troy goes, it's okay, Data. Like, Geordi explained everything to me. And I was like, damn, you're quick to forgive, girl. Because I'd be like, I understand. And that really sucked. But, she's Troy. So she's like, I thought, in the spirit of just being cheeky reciprocity, I'm going to bring you a little snack. And she takes the lid off, and it's a Data cake, and it's really
like
cute.
The cutest little cake because it's Data's whole body on this tray,
his head and everything. It was so cute. And Data said, "I wonder what Dr. Freud would say about devouring oneself." And Troy goes, "Data, sometimes a cake is just a cake." And off they go. The end.
Funnily enough, that never makes me want cake. The little Data cake, it's just so cute. And I'm like, oh, it's a cute little Data. But that other cake, when Worf is eating it, and you don't see that it's Troy, but it's just this big, beautiful slice of cake that all, and the fact that he's enjoying it so much, which he probably in real life was like, this is gross, but he played it well. Yeah. And that always makes me want cake. But anyways, I love how
I'll tell you the difference. Here's my guess what the difference is for you. And you tell me if I'm right or wrong, because I'm just guessing. You see the inside of the cake. It looks like cake, right? Just from the outside, that does not look, Troy cake does not look appetizing to eat. It's just a shit ton of blue and black frosting. So when you see the inside of a cake and you see it's like spongy and light and all that, that's lovely. The Data cake just kind of looks like a bad claymation cake. Like a bad kind of like clay model of Data, right? So that's why, like, if you cut it open and you can see it's like spongy and light and delicious, bingo. That's
you're probably right, because I watched this lady on YouTube who's like this amazing cake maker, and she makes these beautiful cakes, and she does all this fun stuff with cake. And her cakes end up looking like pieces of art, and they are gorgeous. And she like cuts them and takes a bite and tells you what it's like or whatever. But when just looking at the gorgeous cake doesn't make me want to eat the cake, because now the cake is art. But it's when she cuts it and takes a bite where it's beautiful. Like, oh, well, I could take a bite of that. But like just looking at the beauty, like looking at the art 100%. Piece that is cake is not appetizing. I think you're absolutely right. Well, in any case, it's a super cute ending to kind of what could have been a really heavy episode, but ended up just being kind of weird. My final thoughts was I like this episode. I think it's odd and it's a little pointless, but I like that we're able to explore different parts of the ship. I like that there was a real crisis on the ship. Like there were real stakes to this episode. Everyone could have died, even though people didn't take it that seriously. And I just thought it was a crisis.
They're like adrift, whatever, stabbing.
Yeah, whatever. Our cellular peptides are falling apart and we're going to cease to be, but whatever. We'll figure it out. But I thought this was a totally novel crisis that I don't recall seeing before on the show. So what are your final thoughts?
My final thought is kind of the same as yours. I talked a whole bunch at the top of the episode about why I don't like dream episodes, right? However, I will say it really was an interesting concept that Data is somehow unconsciously, subconsciously, I'm not a psych major, I don't know the difference, but somehow he is detecting that there is a pathogen aboard and he's the only one who can see it. And the waking dreams part is like, I don't really get why that was necessary, but the fact that the dream ties back, it's very unlike the Daddy Issues episode where it's just a dream, and then you're like, okay, great, cool, right? Like this was like, oh, okay, like now we have an explanation as to what is happening. So I thought it was an interesting concept for sure. The phased like parasites, that was pretty cool.
That was a cool alien.
It was a cool alien. It felt a little bit like the Trill, but like
more deathy.
More deathy. Yeah. So everybody hang on to your cellular peptides, because thank God that's over.
And your mint frosting.
With your mouth full of frosting. Which actually, after we wrap, I think I'm going to go to the store and get a piece of cake, because now I really want some cake. And I'm not really a sweet eater, but I really do want a piece of cake now.
Yeah, I bet you would have, like, you will probably have one bite of that cake and be like, nope, that's why I don't like cake, and just toss the whole thing.
No, you know what? I did have a little bit of cake today. I actually went.
By the way, I've never seen Andrea eat cake, and we've been friends for like 10 years.
I mean, I like cake. You know what? Actually, I will say this. After the pandemic hit, my stress levels went through the roof. Personal life stuff absolutely disintegrated, stuff like that. And so I eat when I'm stressed. And so my stress eating really kicked up. And I was like, I am not even going to discriminate. Like everything is welcome. So I do eat more sweets now than I did before like a global crisis hit us. And I did have some cake today. I was actually at a veterinarian conference and they had like lunch for the guests and there was cake. And I was like, wow, this cake is really good. But it was like a 2-inch little teeny taste of cake.
It was one bite of cake.
And I was like, I was like 3 bites and I was like, that's perfect.
I mean, you didn't even have cake at your wedding. That's why I'm like,
I sure didn't.
I didn't know
I had creme
I didn't know you
brulee.
knew what cake was.
Yeah, no, I'm not a cake.
You're not a sweets person, which is fine. You're a salty person.
But I will tell you
I'm
this.
a sweets person.
I'm an absolute, I prefer salty over sweets any day. But girl, I will do anything for gummy bears. I love gummy bears so much. But that's like a childhood thing. My dad used to bring us gummy bears. So now it like reminds me of that.
It's a nostalgia thing. It's not because the gummy bears are that exceptional.
Yes. Because you know what? There are so many times where I've eaten them where I was like,
what even is this?
I know it's not even hitting right. You know, and it's like you're eating it because nostalgia. It's not. It's not because it's great. Anyway, I just kind of went off on a tangent. However, I am going to go get a slice of cellular peptide cake with mint frosting. And hold on to your feelings, everybody, because next week we're breaking down season 7, episode 7, Dark Page, and it is a doozy. So thank you guys so much for hanging with us. Have a fantastic week, and we'll see you next week. Bye.
Thanks for geeking out with us. Be sure to join the crew at thetngpodcast.com to be the first to know when we do our live shows or host events exclusively for our members. We'll see you next time.